Now, before we start, yes, I have the Nintendo Switch 2. And I know I made a hate video about it, but to be fair, I was just talking about the model, not the actual Switch 2 itself. And that video came out like, 2 to 3 months before the actual Switch 2 Direct? But looking back into that video, you can easily tell that I was just upset because, well, it was just another Switch 2, something like what they did for the Wii, which didn't make sense for me to make that video in the first place because everyone hates the Wii U, but I actually like it. Maybe in a few days, I'll just go to a blank wall and make an apology video about this. The game prices are still bullshit though. But here's the question though. Is the Switch 2 any good? That's what we're here to find out today. In order to find out, we're going to find the differences between the Nintendo Switch and the Nintendo Switch 2. We'll also go over the Nintendo Switch 2's mechanics that the Switch 1 doesn't have. We won't be mentioning the Nintendo Switch 2 camera since I literally don't have this and I don't think it's worth my money. Now that I got that out of the way, let's get started with the video. So the obvious difference between the two is that, well, the Switch 2 is bigger and the Switch 1 is smaller. The Switch 1, you slide the Joy-Cons in, and for the Switch 2, you snap the Joy-Con inside. The next difference is the kickstand. While I can't obviously show both of them because I lost one of them, you can still obviously tell the difference. I will show how the kickstand of the Nintendo Switch 2 will hold. I know it's nothing too special, but at least it has a lower chance of falling. This one I had to look up for a little bit, but the Nintendo Switch runs in 60 Hz, and the Switch 2 runs in 120 Hz. And because of that, it makes the Switch 2 faster. Look at this comparison. When entering Fortnite, it took the Switch 2 about 37 seconds to completely enter in. But for the Switch 1, it took about a minute and 30 seconds to completely enter in. Even if you try different games, the Switch 1 is always going to be the slower one, due to the Switch 1 having higher limitations. I literally sound like a gaming nerd. Well, I mean, I could be. Also, for the Switch 2, you can use your Joy-Cons as a mouse, which I completely forgot about. The buttons on the rails of the Joy-Cons are smaller on the Switch, but bigger on the Switch 2. One thing I meant to mention earlier but I wasn't too sure of is that you can basically play any Switch 1 game on the Nintendo Switch 2. I just searched this up actually, and the only Switch game you can't play is... What the hell is that? I just looked more into it, and it's that stupid Nintendo cardboard VR headset thingy. Wow, that was horrible. It doesn't really matter anyway. No one's missing that. Remember how on the Switch 1 you had to scan on the Nintendo Switch screen in order to get the saved clip from the Switch to your phone? Well, on the Switch 2, it'll automatically go to your phone if you allow it to. And obviously if you have the Nintendo Switch app. I was hoping to try to hit the video to at least 5 minutes, but seeing how we compared about everything, and I tried to look more into the Switch 2, yeah, we literally went over everything. So after comparing the Switch 2 to the Switch 1, is the Switch 2 worth it? In my opinion, I say yes. I know I went from talking shit about the Switch 2 to actually liking it, and obviously I shouldn't judge the book by its cover. I honestly do appreciate the fixes that the Switch 2 did that the first one had troubles with. Like the Switch 1 having a smaller screen, long loading screens, okay graphics, horrible Joy-Con drift. And the Switch 2 fixed all of that. And as much as I love the Switch 2, it obviously isn't perfect. This is probably just me being slow, but for some reason I was having a bit of trouble when setting up the Nintendo Switch 2. It literally took me 3 minutes on how to connect all of this, which I guess I should blame myself for being slow, not Nintendo. And I'm not a big fan of the remix sounds either for the Nintendo Switch 2. Like, take a look at this. That doesn't bother me too much though. I'll get over that like maybe after like another week or so. It's not that bad. And I know this isn't the Nintendo Switch 2 itself, but holy shit. Load the goddamn game prices! But then again, it's so worth it because the games are actually really good. Frick. But yeah, overall, I think the Nintendo Switch 2 is either an 8.5 out of 10 or a 9 out of 10 at least. If you have the money for it, I definitely recommend the Switch 2. While it's not as good as the PS5 or the Xbox Series X or S, it's still a great choice. Anyway, that's all I had to say, and